The struggle with software vulnerabilities, Mr. Ronald Poole, advanced cyber threat specialist from Trend Micro. Mr. Poole.
Thank you all for attending this session. As said, I'm Ronald Poole. I'm the subject matter expert on advanced cyber threats. Let's just call it sales engineer. I know technology and I know what the products do, and I try to keep up with what the market demands and what the market wants and where we move towards so we can make an optimal solution for everyone. So let's start with a short update on where we stand in the world of cybersecurity. I know you've had a lot of slides before me which also gave an update on where we stand, but of course we've got our own insights, and one of the things that is essential in cybersecurity is knowing where you stand, knowing where the world is moving, and knowing how to protect against the new threats. So what we see is that large-scale untargeted attacks, so the things that go out to the entire world and let's hope someone clicks, and small-scale targeted attacks are being combined. And that's really dangerous, because things that happen here is, for instance, a piece of malware that infects your router, your home router, gets all the information on systems that are in the internal network, then deletes itself before, after uploading the data of your home network to a control host. And if that control host knows about your network and later on starts a targeted attack, it will have all the information of the individual person in his private network. So as you can imagine, that becomes a real dangerous threat where they are not targeting the business network, which you can protect, but it's going to attack the home network of your CIO, maybe the system administrator, because he has all the access inside the network. And that home network is much less protected usually. Another trend that we see are that the targeted attacks are rapidly evolving and intensifying. There's more and more targeted attacks, and they are more and more arrowed, pointed, and intelligent. One of the famous examples of recent was Carbanak. Carbanak is called the biggest bank heist in history without even shooting one bullet because it's all digital. And in all honesty, no one seems to know how much money is stolen since it's all digital money. So tracing back the actual money is all estimates, but there's no direct number on the impact, but it's big. Cyber warfare. We've seen some slides about that, and it's getting bigger and bigger. If you look at the US, they now got green lights to hire 3,000 cyber experts to do cyber warfare, to protect against cyber warfare, but also to actively do cyber warfare. And even the generic attacks, the ones that were sent out to the entire world, are becoming more targeted. You had the emails with the rich Nigerian cousin that wants to send you $1 million if you just give all your data, and somehow people fell for that. But even those kinds of attacks are becoming more targeted. For instance, one of the CryptoLocker versions, called Tesla Crypt, was targeted at gamers. Why? Because gamers already spend money on games. They sometimes even spend a lot of cash on virtual items, which are really important to them. It's the super mega power blade that they bought for I don't know how much money. So if you encrypt their save games and their data, make sure they can't game anymore, can't access that super mega weapon, they will pay to get that save game back. So that even that broad CryptoLocker gets targeted. So a little bit of common math. Attacks are becoming more and more targeted. And as hopefully most of you know, malware nowadays is not written. It's not done by someone in the attic looking at code and analyzing where the vulnerabilities are, writing an attack for it. No, it's just a program which you download from the darknet. And you can click the features you want. And if you click some features, it will say, okay, you need to buy an upgrade package. Okay, let's do that. And you type in which code needs to be executed when everything runs. And if it doesn't work, you can just call their help desk. So they help you build your customized attack. Unfortunately, that's the world we live in now. Cyber warfare and cyber crime have evolved big time. And, well, crisis or no crisis, cyber criminals don't care. They can still make good money out of this. There's more money going on in cyber crime than in drugs. So the malware is not written, but generated in large numbers. Because it's generated, you can make a lot of malware in no time. Governments do cyber warfare, and even the friendly nations are regularly caught lately in the act of cyber espionage towards each other. So not long ago, America got slammed on the fingers by Germany for listening to their leader of the country and that kind of stuff. So whether it's a friendly nation or not, cyber espionage is happening. Also, large generic attacks are used as a troll. They are just thrown out there, getting as much data as they can, and using that data when it becomes relevant, using the info for a later stage attack. So if you put all this together, yeah, what are the chances that you are not already targeted or targeted short term? Sorry to bring this horror story. I know we've already had a lot of horror stories today, but it's the world we live in. So since we get to generate a lot of malware with those generating programs, how targeted are those attacks nowadays? 99% of the new malware is targeted at less than 10 targets. So we see a lot of malware occurring each day, continuously, and because it's those large numbers, you see that most of it, almost everything is only for a small group of targets. 80% is even targeted at one target. So targeted attacks happen continuously. A few more numbers here. 75% of the organizations are compromised within minutes after a hacker starts his attack. We're not talking about hours, not days, and certainly not longer than that, but just minutes. Why? Because the attackers have customized malware, they prepare themselves. They make sure they know who they are going to attack, and so they can target the attack. They can pinpoint it to your weakest link in the organization, in the IT chain, whatever. It's targeted. Over 50% of the organizations that are compromised by an attack take months to discover the breach, let alone fix the breach and do damage assessment and everything. It just takes months, and that means that the attacker has months of playing time in the network, time to find the relevant data they want, time to extract the relevant data. I've seen this slide in more detail a bit earlier, but it takes about 500 euros and limited technical knowledge to change your career to the dark side. You can just get that botnet, you can get that bulletproof hosting, you can get the VPN connections, you can get that subscription with the help desk to make your malware work. So everyone here with a career change in mind, it's a limited investment. And that makes it tricky, because the protection we need to bring from our side is much more elaborate. We need to find a way to cover all those holes that exist in the network, whether it's done by bring your own device, or whether it's done because we've got a firewall rule opened. It's all possible entries. And the attacker, on his side, only has to pinpoint one opening and go for it. And if it doesn't work, we can do the next one. And in the meantime, on the white side, we're all trying to cover all those holes. So you should ask yourself the following questions if you're a company, and that's, do you have a clear view on which data and processes are your crown jewels? What's important to your organization? And yeah, unfortunately, I notice a lot of this questioning in the field where companies don't really know, where you get answers like, yeah, we've got everything in the centralized server network, we got a file server, database server, that's pretty much our crown jewels, we got it clear. Oh wait, no, there's this guy with a NAS somewhere in the network, and there's this guy with, and that's of course a risk. So make sure you have clear information on where your crown jewels exist. Are the crown jewels properly protected? And proper protection is not just firewalling. It's not just allowing access or not allowing access. Access can go through other means. Access can go from your administrator PC, for instance, which might be open through a firewall rule because the administrator should always have access to it. But if the administrator system is compromised, then they have access. So is access to those crown jewels based on trust, or are you actively monitoring it? Do you know what's happening to the crown jewels? So yes, cyber threat security remains a cat and mouse chase. It's not something where you buy one box or one software solution which magically solves all problems, which magically keeps the hackers out. That's not going to happen. But it's a cat and mouse chase. And the only thing you can do is continuously stay up to date and keep it tight. We see very often that the reference framework of someone doing security for a company is limited to his own company. He does not talk often to other people in the same circumstances. We see that it's way too limited. If you only look at your own organization, if you only look at your own, what you think are threats to you, you don't have a bigger picture, you don't have a broader reference, so you don't know what you're missing. And that's the challenge in security in the first place. You don't know what you don't know. And unfortunately, even in our digital world where everything is automated, humans are still the weakest link time after time. One of the examples here is we often see the targeted attacks in the form of spear phishing emails, the mails with an attachment which seems to be okay, seems to come from someone we trust, and you just open it and bam, your network's open to the attacker. These are often pointed at certain individuals within the organization. Why? Because these people share a lot on their social media accounts. They share a lot on LinkedIn, on Facebook. So the attacker has a lot of info to generate that email to make sure it is being clicked. Because if I know you're working on a specific project and I know that you're communicating a lot with someone from your LinkedIn profile, then it's easier and it's likelier for you to click that email if I make it look like it's coming from that person and it's about something relevant. And it can be a PDF. A PDF, which if you open it, it actually shows you the content of the PDF, which looks normal, but in the meantime, the back door is open. So we see a lot of these targeted attacks in the form of spear phishing emails being sent, for instance, to HR departments, because the HR departments are usually not that tech savvy. They are less aware of security than the IT department, and they communicate a lot, do a lot on social media, so they are easy targets for the attacker. So they always go for the weakest link. So the only thing you can do in this cat and mouse chase is arm yourself with knowledge. This is a good step in that. Being here, knowing what's going on, hearing the different vendors and other people speak here, knowing what they offer and why they offer it nowadays, that's a good step. Also share your knowledge and your intelligence. Because only if we work together, we can get a broader scope, broader picture, and target against those attacks that are also targeted. And try to filter out the weak links in the system where possible. Simple examples are, there are systems nowadays which check emails based on a lot of generic things. Is the email actually sent directly from the sending mail server to the receiving mail server? Or has it gone through a path of, 10 Chinese servers, 5 Indian servers? An unlikely path. Is there suspicious behavior in the communication, suspicious behavior in the way the mail is set up? Then it should be blocked. So humans are good of trust. We see an email which seems to be okay, so we'll assume it's okay. You can figure that out by implementing a system which does that filtering for you. So to go into more depth to the actual topic here now, this was the update, but now the software vulnerabilities. Vulnerabilities happen. We can have a long talk on why they happen, and there's a zillion reasons, but they do happen. I just got some information, latest information on some of the open source projects, the big open source projects, because simply open source projects share this info. The closed source projects, you don't get to know all the vulnerabilities, of course, but they're there just as much as in open source. And if you look at, for instance, Google Chrome, you see that there are 641 CVEs. CVEs are known vulnerabilities in 6 million lines of code. So that means there are 0.10 vulnerabilities per 1,000 lines of code. And these are not the applications that are written by some guy who just starts to learn programming. This is done by the big ones. And this is done by an entire community that helps and everything. So if this happens at these programs, you can imagine what happens with the smaller scale programs. There's a lot of numbers here. I won't burden you with reading them all. You've probably read them by now anyway. But these are just the known vulnerabilities. And you can be really sure that there are also unknown vulnerabilities in there. And we will figure them out over time. But new ones will be introduced in time too. So flawless coding currently is sort of an illusion. We've seen programs which were actually flawless, but those are usually really expensive programs like the operating drive for first space shuttle. Not too much code and really largely tested and analyzed. So code analysis, if you want to analyze your coding, it often takes a lot of time and money, and that's something which is usually not acceptable for the business, because the business wants a program and it needs to be out as soon as possible, because then we can start making money on it or offer a service to our customers. And you don't want that to be delayed over and over because some security guy says it needs to be tested and analyzed more. So we often see that securing the code is postponed afterwards. Let's just get it out and we'll secure the code later on. And that never happens because then we end up in a new project and everything. And let's not forget, if you start fixing code, it costs time and money, but it's likely to introduce new vulnerabilities again, because there's still a human programming, making errors, overseeing things. Because it's not just typos or something, it's also things like when you reserve some memory space, you need to make sure that it's limited to that memory space and it can't move over to other memory spaces, because then you can integrate buffer overflows and get your code executed as an attacker. So as Trend Micro, we've got two solutions against these type of vulnerabilities. The first one is virtual patching. I'm assuming most of you or all of you know Trend Micro from anti-malware. We're one of the big players in that area. But it's broader than that, what we offer. We've got over 50 products in security, so definitely talk to us if you think we're still only a malware company. One of the things we do is virtual patching, or actually it's vulnerability shielding, which is a more suiting name, but somehow Gartner, I think, was the one that called it virtual patching, and now everyone does. And that means that our products, either Office Scan or Deep Security, can protect your programs, your systems from attacks. So what normally happens is a system becomes vulnerable. We know that it's vulnerable now. It takes an amount of time before the patch is brought out. It will take some time for you to test the patch before you release it into your entire organization and possibly bring down all those systems. And then you can deploy it. So in the end, you see that there's only a small amount of time when you're actually patched, and that moves forward, of course, but there's a large amount of time where you're still vulnerable for attacks against your vulnerabilities. It's even worse when you have legacy applications. Windows XP nowadays is one of the legacy applications. There are vulnerabilities for plenty of these types of software which are used regularly, which are being abused, and Microsoft or Oracle as Java is not patching because they have end of support for those products. When you're in specific business, you see point of sale terminals, which are often really outdated, or medical systems, which no one should touch because then support ends. And they are a risk within your network, because as soon as they get compromised, they got access in, and someone can just, well, elevate their privileges if they're in there and start spreading throughout your network. They are an easy point of attack. So what happens when we do virtual patching? We start, as soon as we know there's a vulnerability, we write code which can detect that vulnerability on a network level. So we see the network traffic, and we can analyze, will this network traffic actually hit this vulnerability? If yes, block it. And that means your time to be patched, your time to be secured, turns from days into hours. Some examples here are Heartbleed and Shell Shock, which were of course big in the news last year. It took us 2 hours to get our customers protected against those two. And some of the systems that are vulnerable for Shell Shock are still vulnerable for Shell Shock because they are abandoned Linux distributions, or they are from other vendors who have sort of built their own appliance based on a Linux distribution but haven't updated that yet. So there's a risk there. The other thing is behavioral analysis. So before I go into detail there, I want to sketch some context on what the world of anti-malware looks like. How do we protect you against malware? The first of all is pattern-based. We look at patterns of code. When that comes by, we know, okay, this is malicious. We've seen this before, let's block it. That's the ancient way. That's the easy way. But as said before, malware is now not coded, but generated in large numbers, so it's impossible to keep up with patterns, especially if they're used only once. You cannot make a pattern for something that's used once and try to protect the rest of the world against it, because it's never going to happen again. And doing that way, working that way in the future, would mean you get enormous databases of patterns, slowing down the systems, and, well, not having real added value. The second level is heuristics. And heuristics means we look at the code of the malware that's coming in. We look at the code of a program or a document, and we are just looking at what's it going to do? What can it do? Okay, I see that it's going to make registry entries. I see that it's going to make executable files. I see that it's going to communicate to certain domains on the internet. That's what you do in heuristics. But guess what? A lot of programs nowadays have encrypted code, either because the developer doesn't want you to see the code and wants to hide it, or because it's an attacker that doesn't want heuristics to work. So heuristics is also being challenged by the malware writers. So now we got to find another solution. We got the patterns, we got the heuristics. Both aren't fully equipped to deal with modern threats. What can we do? We can actually execute the code. Let's just make it do its thing. Let's sandbox it. In a small virtual environment, we let it execute, and we just move in time, because maybe it only executes after X days or after so many mouse movements. Can be a lot of things they can test on. And we'll do all those tricks. We'll move the mouse, we'll push keyboard buttons, and we'll move time. And we see what it does. We actually let it execute, but in a controlled environment. That's behavioral analysis. You look at what it's actually going to do. And that's what we do with our Deep Discovery Inspector. So what happens when a targeted attack occurs is the attacker will first gather intelligence. As I said, this is what they do nowadays, and they use social media a lot, and the more we share on social media, the happier they are, because their work gets easier. That doesn't mean that I want you all to stop using social media, because there's a good use to it too, but you should be sensitive on which data am I going to share. And if it's the projects you are working on, chances are no one's going to care, so why share it if an attacker can abuse it against you? 90% of their time now goes into intelligence gathering. Second step, they will target that malware, that single piece of malware which is generated just for this attack, targeted at one person on which they gathered enough intelligence, and they're in. When they're in, the code will actually connect to a command and control server, and get its actual payload. What am I going to do? Now that I'm in a network, what am I going to do? Am I going to find files? Am I going to spread? Am I going to use other malware to spread out throughout the network? That's not being done in that first email. Why not? Because chances are that it's going to get caught then. The more code you put in there, the higher the chances some anti-malware solution will catch it. So they keep it lean and mean, and here comes the actual payload. This means there's communication to the outside world. When we know what we're going to do as malware, we're going to spread throughout the network. We're going to search the things we want to find. We're going for the crown jewels. And when we have them, we extract them, and job's done. So you see some solutions in the market nowadays which protect you against advanced persistent threats or do advanced threat detection. But most of them focus on the gateway, which means you hope to find this email, you hope to see it. But as said, that's lean and mean, so chances are it'll stay under the radar. Then we got the command and control traffic. And this is the big money page for those solutions. This is where they want to see you. This is what they want to catch. They see communication to an IP address that they know is bad. And if you're unlucky, they see this part, the data being extracted. At least now you know the data is being extracted and you know what's being leaked, so you can proactively, start your communication plan and everything about the leaked data. But the pain is done. So the thing we do different is we have our inspector appliance, Deep Discovery Inspector, which sits in your network. Yes, it gets the data from the gateway, because we want to see these things too. But we also see a lot of lateral movement. As soon as they're in, most attackers feel safe. Really happy that they do, because they start using commands like WMI commands from Windows, or they upload a PSExec to administrative share, start executing commands, which normally an administrator could do too. But an administrator doing that at 2 a.m. when he's in bed, that might sound some alarm bells, right? That's one of the things we catch. There are a lot of things we catch. Same goes for malicious apps. When malicious apps are downloaded on a mobile device, we've got this reputation database on which apps are okay, which ones are not. And we can just show you, okay, now there's an app coming into the network which might become a threat. You may want to look into this. So we see a lot happening and can alert you based on what's actually happening in the network. Very important is we look at over 100 protocols. So we don't just look at HTTP and SMTP and SMB. SMB is the / server / share name which you can access. We look at a lot because the attackers, they are targeting you. It's a targeted attack, so it's personal. And if they don't get in through that email, they'll go for plan B because they want to get in. It's targeted. And if plan B fails, they'll go to plan C. So if you're only looking at email, which they are using in 90% of the cases, why it's the easy way in, they will go for plan B or plan C. And you're not going to see that if you're only looking at the big 3 protocols. Because we look not only inbound and outbound traffic, but also at internal traffic, we get to see all this lateral movement. And this is a way higher catch rate than just looking at the gateway. Because as I said, this one could go below the radar. This one, you hope to catch, but maybe you didn't. Because it's a new IP, which isn't yet on the blacklist. Or someone brings in a USB stick, which contains a combination of these. It contains the actual malware code. You're not going to see that if you're looking at just the gateway. And we got an integrated custom defense solution. That means we don't just have our solution, we also integrate with other solutions, but also other solutions from our portfolio, so we can proactively arm you against those attacks. So a new attack comes in. It's a new piece of malware, which is only used for you. We can generate a custom signature on that attack and provide the rest of our portfolio with that signature to protect you from spreading. We can also talk to your firewall. We've done a sandbox analysis. We see that it communicates with this domain, this domain, this domain, this domain. Push an ACL into the firewall to block that traffic, so it can never get its payload and actually start doing something. That kind of stuff, and there's a lot more going on there, is done in our deep discovery. If you would like more information on either threats, on the evolving landscape, or on these products and how to arm yourself against this, please visit us. We are over here, we're drinking coffee, just tap us on the shoulder or contact us. Thank you.